Hi everybody, I'm really excited to share this podcast with you. I spent some time with Steph and Rob Hayden talking about their son Max and their experiences raising a child who has an undiagnosed condition, and they had some really fascinating and profound things to share with me.
Yeah, it was great to hear about the importance of the special school community in helping families feel that they had a place where their child belonged and they were happy. But overall, it was just brilliant to hear from Steph and Rob, and a real privilege to get their take on their very personal experiences. So thank you to them for this very insightful and brave podcast.
Absolutely, I think everybody can take something away from this. We really hope you enjoy. Welcome to the second Ask the Expert, the Parent Voice podcast. The 28th of April is Undiagnosed Children's Day, a day to raise awareness for thousands of young people who are born in the UK each year with a syndrome without a name or genetic disorder that is so uncommon it's likely to be misdiagnosed. These young people are called SWAN children, which stands for Syndrome Without a Name. I've invited Rob and Steph Hayden to come and have a chat with me today about their experiences raising their son Max, who has an undiagnosed genetic condition. Welcome both, it's really lovely to see you.
Hi, thanks for having us.
No, thank you for coming in. So you are the parents to the wonderful Max. Can you start just by telling us a little bit about him?
Oh, where to start? So Max is, I call him our warrior. He is just an amazing little boy. He goes through life with such a big smile. He's had so many challenges and so much to deal with, and there will be more in the future. But I always say he does life with a smile, and I think that's a nice way to describe Max.
Yeah, I would probably just second everything you said there, and the fact that he, despite everything he's gone through, he always seems to get through it without complaining and just gets on with it. He is a fighter, he always has been, and he's just a bit of an inspiration really at times when you take so much for granted and you see what he goes through. He's just incredible really, and he's happy, he loves school, you know, he's not like any other little boy, but he is amazing, isn't he?
Yeah, we're often in awe of him.
Yeah, absolutely. He's fabulous, and obviously I'm going to disclose at this point that he is in my class, so I am slightly biased. So guys, how did you first come to find out that Max had a syndrome without a name? Was this early on? Was this later?
It was quite well. We knew early on there was issues. So within 24 hours of Max being born, we knew there was issues with his eyes. So we have the 24-hour baby check. They come in at the hospital and just check baby over, and they couldn't find the red reflex, which is obviously, you often see that when you take a picture in the eye, you'll get red eye.
Okay.
So they're looking for that. They couldn't find that, which meant he was born with cataracts.
Right.
So that was the first sign. He was born with another condition called hypersphagia, which affects genitals on boys. That's quite a common thing, but when you start to put more than one condition together, then within 48 hours we found out he'd also got a condition called microphthalmia, which is underdeveloped eyes, so they were smaller. So within 48 hours there was three conditions that they'd already said, right, he has this.
That's massive, within 48 hours of your first child being born.
It was a bit of a shock, and I remember I'd had to have an emergency C-section with Max, and I'd been put into a room with another mum next to me, and there was a curtain between us when they told us this. And I remember sobbing, so we were both just sobbing, and knowing this, and her look when I saw her when I was leaving, and her just look of pity on her face. And I know she meant well, but that was then to become how it was for some time, people looking at you in a certain way, and that was my first experience. Like she'd obviously heard absolutely everything, and then she'd heard us crying. So I mean, I felt a little bit sorry for her, to be honest. But within before I'd left the hospital, we'd just been hit with this, and it was just I was numb. I think I was numb at that point.
I think that when we left the hospital, it was just cataracts in both eyes, and that there was the hyperspadia, which, with it being common in boys, wasn't a big deal. It could be sorted out when they're about a year old, 18 months old. But it was when we then went to the hospital about 4 days later for a second opinion on the cataracts, and that's when they realised he'd got microphthalmia as well. And then it was weird, because I kind of went there with the hope of he's just got the cataracts, that's it, they can do something. And then it became a bit of all of a sudden, we can operate, we can do this, and it became, within that day of, he's basically blind, kind of in like a 24-hour period. So the kind of hope kind of went then. But this, at the end of that day, for example, it was still, he just can't see very well, kind of thing. So all of these other things that followed, we didn't really know at that point, did we, that there was going to be more to come.
No, massive change in just a space of a few hours, how it can go from one thing to another. And I take it followed on like that?
It did. It escalated really quickly. We were referred left, right and centre to different professionals, paediatricians, there was ophthalmologists, then it was neurologists, and it just... it just seemed that we were at the hospital a lot. Yeah. We got to know our way around that hospital a lot. And then the operation started. So it was we've got to operate on his eyes, because if we don't, he's going to be completely blind. So for any chance of any vision, we need to operate. And that was to remove the cataracts in both eyes. Unfortunately, there was nothing they could do about microphthalmia. It is what it is. So I think he was 9 weeks when he had the first operation, and it wasn't a success.
Oh, goodness.
So we were sat waiting, and oh my goodness, and any parent that's had their child where they, have anaesthetic and they go under, it is horrific, and especially the first time, and a baby as well, it was horrific. And so you're sat there waiting, and the consultant came in and explained to us that air had gone into his eye where it shouldn't have, and she'd had to suspend the operation. And then she started crying. So we had a consultant just sobbing.
Oh my.
And it was, she obviously felt completely responsible. But as a new parents, and it's just...
Fill you with confidence.
It was terrifying. I just remember just sitting there listening to her, and you're hearing the words, but you're thinking, this doesn't make sense. What do you mean it's gone wrong? How has it gone wrong? I mean, you sign this paperwork, and there's the risk of things not going as they should, but you think, my goodness, this little boy does not deserve this. Come on, this can't be happening.
I remember that very vividly, because when the consultant came in to tell us, I was stood up. I don't know if Steph was sat down, but I was stood up, and when she came in and said there'd been a problem, I remember feeling faint, and I had to sit down. And the consultant got upset telling us about it. I remember I got up and comforted her.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Because she still is, and she always was, really nice lady. You could tell she always wanted the best for Max. But I remember at that time I stood up, was comforting her, saying, don't worry, he'll be okay, we'll get it right. The next operation's next week, kind of thing. So that was a weird experience, because I think that was probably one of the first kind of instances where you realise perhaps that we'd never actually take the time for ourselves and comfort each other. It's just always fast foot, it's always on the go and never having a break. But I remember off the back of that operation, we think he developed another condition, the glaucoma that he's got in his right eye.
Because of that,
Because of that failed surgery the first time. So that then caused a new chain of events with the glaucoma and going to Birmingham Children's Hospital. Because laser surgery and all this stuff.
Yeah, it became so complex after that. Yeah. I think to be honest, it was complex in the beginning, but they thought they could handle it, and then it just it escalated, and they kind of said, I think you need to go to Birmingham Children's Hospital, and we still go there to this day annually now, so not as much, but it had pros and cons. It's a long way to go, but the confidence and the reassurance that you got from the consultant there was, it was a very different experience. It was, you could tell he'd come from Great Ormond Street. He was the expert in Max's eye condition, and I just wish we'd gone there first. But in hindsight, I always say you don't know what you don't know.
Of course you don't.
Yeah. And one of my favourite sayings since having Max. And we didn't know that you could say, well, actually, is there somebody that's done this operation a lot? And would they be available to do our son's operation? You don't know to ask that. Well, I've got better at asking questions like that, obviously. But at the time, we should have known, yeah.
And it's so important to pass that information on to other parents as well who are going through the same thing, who, like you, wouldn't have known, who are completely blindsided because, you've got this relatively newborn child, you're new to parenthood, full stop, and then you've got all these complexities on top of it. You trust that the experts are the people that are going to do the best job for you. So
and she wanted to, but she hadn't got the experience, unfortunately, and I think that played a massive part in what went wrong. Thankfully, the next operation, which was for the other eye, was a success, and then I think it was the following week we had the original eye operated on, and that was sorted out. And then we started contact lenses, as you do on a 3-month-old baby. Putting contact lenses in. Obviously, they were specialised and they were from the hospital, and that was because his natural lens had been removed. With the cataract surgery with children is very different to adults. They remove the whole natural lens, so not just the cataract. So he hadn't got a lens to focus. So the contact lenses became his lens, so he could focus on things. And that was an experience in itself, having to put contacts in because they were daily as well. So you had to, and I remember going in at night while he was asleep. He'd been asleep about an hour, and then I'd take them out, and then I'd set my alarm for 4:30 in the morning, and I'd go back in to put the contact lens back in his eye because I hadn't mastered it enough where I could do it when he was awake. I eventually got there, as you do, but at the time, I remember. And then I'd go back to bed But yeah, it's and then I eventually showed Rob. I said, right, come on, and I taught you.
I mean, Steph was amazing at it from the word go with the lenses. I struggled like mad with it. Whether or not part of it was because you wore contact lenses yourself before, but I don't know. I was just petrified of doing it, but I finally did pluck up the courage and. I wanted to do it. It was like, I've got to do this kind of thing. So it was like getting up at 4 in the morning or whatever and just sliding them into his eyes kind of thing. But it just become part of our daily routine, innit? To put them in the morning, take them out at night, clean them, that whole routine. But then every so often you'd look at him and be like, where's his contact lens gone?
Gosh.
It's rolled up to his eye or it's fell out. But they were very durable things, but
different from what you get from Specsavers or something. Yeah, they were very different.
It's weird how something such a big deal becomes so just like a part of our daily routine, and part of Max's routine. He was the one, having it done, whether or not he understood what was going on. But that is why we ended up getting glasses. The backup glasses as well, because some days it just becomes so stressful if he wasn't playing ball, and as he got a little bit older, just sod it, might edit that bit out. Put his glasses on for a bit, kind of thing. Let him, but the glasses, they don't look so bad now, but they looked kind of not ridiculous, but
very thick.
They were very bulbous.
He looked like a bug.
Yeah, a bit
bug
like
eyes, didn't
like
he? Yes, he did look like a minion. Yes, good description.
So it's that thing of you shouldn't care what people think, but you're taking him round in a buggy when he was a baby, and he's this baby with these massive glasses on with massive eyes, and you get people look at you and you stare at you and you're like, you're already struggling a little bit with other stuff, and so I don't need people staring at my son. Or so we've had a lot of years where we, especially with Max when he was young. When he was a baby, taking him out and about wasn't that big a deal. It's like just a baby. But then I think as certain things started happening and changing, and like feeding and stuff like that, and some noises he'll make, vocalisations or crying a lot, and you've got no idea what's going on. A lot of people probably, like, if I hear it now, I'm a bit oblivious to it because we've been through that, we've had babies and we know what it's like. But at the time when you're the parent going through it, you think, oh God, what does everyone think? I just want to get the hell out of here. But we've had plenty of times where people have just stared at him and you can feel it and you kind of want to say something. I remember one incident where these two elderly people were just staring at him when he was making we'd been away on a vacation with a charity, and we'd had a brilliant time. Everyone was included. It was for people with disabilities, and so Max did things like zip lining, canoeing and all this stuff, and it was brilliant. And then on the way home we stopped at the services, and you were back like with everyone else, and then he was like just getting stared at again, and you just kind of, you can feel it. But we, on the whole, we don't let it bother us too much now, do we? And I think we get it less and less. I think probably because we live where we live and people recognise you a bit more. It's very rare that we'll go out and about and someone, or won't see someone who knows Max or recognise him from the school or a different setting.
I'm different. I remember that point vividly. Looking back, I was definitely grieving. At the time, you're just in the thick of it and you're trying to look after this child and do what's best for them, and you feel like you're fighting fires all the time to get what he needs, and I'm very focused on that. You know, my child needs this, I've got to get this for him, you know, this is going to make his life better. But looking back, I was definitely grieving for the child I thought I was going to have and the life I thought we were going to have as a family, what we were going to do, all these plans, all ideas, and they were just gone in an instant. And you've got this new reality that you've got to deal with, and so I definitely, I mean, I said to Rob once we were having a difficult day, and I remember saying, hopefully these will be dark days and we'll look back and think, yes, they were the dark days, but we got through it, and we definitely did. But at the time, I struggled. I should have had some help, but it was never offered. There isn't help there. I mean, really, I should have been proactive, gone to my GP and said, you know, I'm grieving, I'm really struggling, I need some counselling, I need something. But I didn't, and you get through it in the end. But there were times when Rob would obviously go out to work and I'd be at home with Max as a baby and a toddler. And when he became a toddler, he vocalised, and his vocalisations were very different to your typical or average child. And I couldn't always make myself go out the front door. It became very difficult for me to leave the house. My house was my safe zone. I didn't get stared at. Nobody commented. I didn't feel like we were in a zoo being stared at. So, and I really had to work. I had to make myself deal with that. I had to make myself leave the house. You know, we've got to go and get milk or bread or whatever. And I was like, no, we're going out today. We're going to do it. But I massively struggled with that. I think I did a lot more than Rob, because Rob would offer taking Max out to give me a break. And I was always amazed that he could do that, because I struggled with it so much. And he was just, I was very aware of everybody looking, of everybody pointing. And as he's got older, yes, it has become easier for me, but I found that really difficult to deal with. And yes, looking back, I should have had help, and that's one thing I would say to other parents, is recognise that, you know, you can go and ask for help and it is there, but unfortunately, because it's not, you know, well, you've got depression because of this, or you've got depression because of that, and these facilities are available. Nobody offers you, because it isn't there, because you haven't lost a child. No. So it's, I remember once a health visitor coming around and she said, how are you doing? And I think she regretted asking the question, because nobody had really probed into how I was doing mentally. And I just broke down and I said, I'm not doing well. And the look on her face, it was like, oh my goodness, I don't know what to do with this mum now. She's now sobbing. And I remember apologising and saying, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to make it awkward. I'm so sorry. And we just carried on the conversation. Whereas I think if only she'd have said at that point, I think you need some help. You need to go and talk to somebody. I don't think the outcome would have been any different. I think I'd still have got where I am now. It just may have happened sooner, and I may not have been in such a dark place for so long, I think. But thankfully, I did get myself out of it with Rob's support and my family as well. We've got a very good family.
I remember that period very well because obviously I would go off to work, and I remember coming home sometimes and the house would be either dark, or Steph would either look stressed or upset, or I knew what she was having to kind of stay. She was suffering with it, which is why at like weekends I'd be like, I'm taking him out for a walk. But I do remember that period very well, and it was tough. And when Steph mentioned about getting some kind of help and talking to someone, neither of us really did. Because at the start of when Max was going through his issues, we didn't tell anyone at kind of work or close friends about what he was going through for about a year, because I had to tell my management, of course, because he's had to have some operations on his eyes, but I couldn't talk about it too much. It was just too difficult. And I didn't tell friends, I didn't tell co-workers, because we just didn't know what was going to happen. It was just too hard. And obviously only a few years ago I actually did get some help to talk to someone about stuff. And some of the stuff I was talking about was stuff like when he was a baby, when we were struggling, this, and it was like really opening things up. And you think, I've kept this in for like 8 years, and this is the kind of thing I should have talked to someone about 8 years ago. And I remember a lady coming round to see us from Memphis, a lady called Jodie, who was really nice. And she said to us one day, like, how do you feel out of like, on a scale of 1 to 10? And I think you might have said something like a 6 or a 7, like default, oh yeah, I'm all right. And I think I said 3, which shocked her a little bit. It was like, why? I was just like, because we're just struggling. We just don't know what to do. It's hard work. You look after a baby, that's your number one priority, isn't it? Like when we got back from hospital, we were told he can't see and he's got small eyes and he's got to have this operation. You get home, it's a baby, you got to feed it.
Yes.
You got to change its bum, you got to get it to go sleep, you've got to look after yourself. And so everything goes out the window other than looking after a baby. And then you get in a routine of and you forget about looking after yourself, you forget about things you might be entitled to, the help, talking to people, and it all becomes like this vacuum almost of you in your own world, and you've got to kind of get out of it. But
as he got older, obviously it became more obvious, you know, he didn't reach milestone after milestone after milestone. There wasn't the gurgling, the mamas, the dadas, those sounds you expect. They never happened. He didn't crawl, he didn't sit, he didn't walk, and you start to think, oh my goodness, there's a lot more going on here. And that's when I started to feel that I was in a minority within a minority, because there was all these groups you could go to, and it's like, well, hang on then, my child can't talk or walk, and although all these children with special needs, it was like, but they all can. And I started to feel more and more isolated, because you just then started to think, I don't even fit into the disability world. You know, where does my son fit? Where do we fit? It was difficult. And there was actually a charity that tried to involve us, and there was some kind of activity, and Rob asked about it. Now they knew of our son, not well, but they knew his conditions, and she actually came back and said, oh, I don't think it'd be the right fit. And a few years later, we actually met her. We'd never met her in person. I think it was over the phone you spoke to her. We ended up meeting her in person, and Rob explained about this one time that we felt really isolated and like we didn't fit anywhere, because there was this event for the disabled group of children and their families, and they actually recommended that we didn't go because he wouldn't be able to participate fully. And she said, I'm really sorry that was me, and I didn't know I made you feel like that.
It was...
Yeah, I mean,
it was weird, because
it was very odd.
We were trying to, be a bit more proactive, like, this is happening, everyone can come along, everyone's going to have a disability, that you won't be, you won't feel judged, and, everyone's in the same kind of boat. And And yeah, it was
actually like,
it's
no,
like,
you're in the
but,
dinghy behind.
He might not get much out of this because he can't walk, and there's a lot of walking involved, and you kind of think, well, okay, so what can he do?
Yeah.
And
so you're feeling even more isolated than you did. I mean, so you go from having a child that there's a diagnosis around the vision, he's going to be profoundly visually impaired. So at what point did it start to become apparent? Was the genetic testing?
The genetic side was quite early on. It was only probably around the 3 or 4 month mark they started to talk to us about it, and we became part of the genetics family, if you like. We all had blood taken so they could test us as well, and you expect to get something back. But I would say around 6 months, I think he was about 6 months old when we were all tested, and there was a program on at the time called the 100,000 Genome Project, and they asked us if we wanted to be part of it, obviously mainly Max, but our blood was, as I say, was taken as well. And it was, gene sequencing, and we were convinced we'd get a diagnosis. We said, yes, we want to go on that. We'd like some answers, please. So they suspected very early on that it was a syndrome because there was more than one condition. I think as soon as you get around 2 or 3 conditions, it's no longer a coincidence. There's something more going on. And yeah, the word syndrome was mentioned to us, and the fact that it could be genetic. So yes, we went down that route. We actually only got the results the end of last year, and he's still a swan.
Wow. So that's results from the original.
Yes, it's taken that long.
Yeah.
It took that long. I remember chasing it up through his paediatrician a couple of times, but no, we got them back. And he'll stay in the system. He stays on genetics, and he's there in the background. When anything new comes about, and they can test for something else, they will. But he's been tested for specific syndromes where somebody that we've met, a consultant of some description, has said, I think he could have this. He's displaying as this. We must have 5. I think, probably up to around 5, where they've thought, I think he could have this. Test, and they then write to genetics, say, actually, can you specifically test him for this? Always comes back negative. But yeah, we got the results, and I said, and he did. It was a bit of a slap in the face, because you want to know. The trouble is with being undiagnosed, it doesn't change the day to day, but what it doesn't do, it doesn't give you any idea of how the future's going to be.
Yes.
You have no idea what's in store for him. You don't know if he's life limited. You assume he probably is to some extent, but you have no idea. And I think what's clinched it, that he definitely has a syndrome, is when he was 5 years old, and out of the blue, he developed epilepsy. It was literally overnight. And that was a complete and utter shocker. Yeah. And that you think you know what you're dealing with, you think you've got your game plan on, and you're like, yeah, we know what we're doing now, we know what we're dealing with, we can do this. And then, my goodness, it was just a rug pulled under. It's awful. I wouldn't wish epilepsy on my worst enemy. It is a horrific thing to try and deal with. And in Max's case, he got full tonic-clonic. So these are the seizures that you see on TV, where it's somebody collapses, they go unconscious, and then their body jerks and shakes. So that's tonic-clonic, and he would be exhausted. He would go unconscious, and they just seemed to escalate. There was more and more, and we went under the. Then it was like, right, you need to see neurology. And he was given medication, but it got worse. He was given another medication, it got worse. And they just kept pumping him full of this really strong medication. He became like a zombie. His weight plummeted because he wasn't awake long enough throughout the day to actually get enough food down him. So then dietitians became involved. Yeah. And we had 18 months of it just being hideous. And it affected him so much. It changed his personality. He was just a very unhappy little boy that was dosed up on a lot of medication, becoming quite thin, and it was just horrible. It was absolutely horrible.
And because he fortunately has now gone nearly 18 months without a seizure, which is amazing, I struggle to remember, as in being in that place to an extent, but it became our normal again. I think that's why, when I look back at it, I feel like I've not moved on from it. And I think I remember Steph saying something to it at one point, like, it was part of our routine. I just want our normal life back. And I think it was jokes like what our life was normal before epilepsy. You know, it was crazy then. To someone on the outside, like, oh God, your life's a bit crazy. Your kid going through all this. And I'm like, yeah, but that's our normal. Then it's like epilepsy. It's like, and then after so many months of that, it's like, yeah, well, this is our normal again. And it's like every morning he'd have a seizure. Like, that become part of the routine.
And we deliver him here asleep. He comes to school asleep, yes.
Do you mind if he comes to school and is asleep? Or sometimes he might go asleep for 2 hours. Or even at the weekend, it got to a point sometimes where he was so angry and irritable. It was like, you need to have a seizure. You could feel he needed it. And then he'd have one, and it'd be worrying, you know, but then he'd have a nap. And then he'd wake up and be like, okay, we've had a break now as well. You've had a seizure and a nap. It gave us a bit of it was a really weird thing to think of it that way. But there were times when it's like he needed it. But, you know, there were the times when he'd turn blue and...
Stop breathing, yeah.
And it was frightening. And it was just another thing that happened with him. And you kind of think, well, why is he going through all this? Why him?
Yeah, didn't he have enough? That's what you think. Yeah, hadn't he got enough to deal with already? You know, why is this all of a sudden come out of the blue? It was, and the first time I remember being in the garden with my sister, and Max was playing next to me, and then all of a sudden he had a seizure, and we didn't think too much of it. You know, my sister had seen it plenty of times, and then so I made sure he was okay. He came out of it quite quickly, and then within 5 seconds he went again. And I remember looking at my sister, and I said, "Oh, this isn't right." And then that carried on for 15 minutes. He'd come out, back in, come out. And so I said to Rob, we need to call an ambulance at this point. And that was the first time he was taken to hospital in an ambulance because of his epilepsy. And I just remember being so scared and thinking, is it ramped up to this? Is this now what we're going to have to deal with? It's you know, where he can't come out of seizures. He's just in and out. And, yeah, that was horrible.
And like you've said, because he doesn't have a label, because he doesn't have a diagnosis, you've got no other kind of parent support group to talk to, to compare experiences or to know that this happened for them. And as things change, you're just having to adapt. And that's what comes across really strong, that you just adapt to every change in situation and you just make it your new normal.
I think it knocks us at first, but then you just think, okay, so what can we do to make this better? And I'm getting stronger with my opinions. And I remember his neurologist wanting to increase the medication again, and I said no, we need to try another one, because he was already on a really high dose. I'd looked it up. He was already on a really high dose. And I thought, this medication is just not working. It doesn't matter how much we put into him, it's not working. And I said, we need to try another medication. Now, I don't know whether it was this medication or something else. And we will never know. And that's what his neurologist said as well. We'll never know. But not too long after starting this medication, the seizures started to reduce. And then eventually... they stopped overnight.
It's a weird... You're saying about, like, it becomes our normal again. I think, like, I remember, because we've obviously got in touch with all these different charities to do with his eyes, his vision, epilepsy. And I remember years ago, I was talking to a lady or chatting with her, and she was saying it gets easier. As he gets older, it gets easier. But this was a lady who was specifically to do with the small eyes and visual impairment. And for her son, it got easier because that was perhaps the only underlying condition. But as the years went on for us, I think it got easier in terms of you accept the way he is and what he goes through, and it becomes a normal. But it's not easier for him. It just becomes so normal to us, and
And it also scares you in the fact that you think, right, so what could be next? Because we thought we knew what he got. We thought we knew his conditions, what he was dealing with every day. And then obviously the epilepsy came along, and you think, well, is there going to be more? And there's always that at the back of your mind, like, well, what could be next? But yeah, not having, I mean, I'm lucky because of where Max goes to school, this school, I've met some fantastic parents, and I'm very close to a couple of mums, and that's so important to have that friendship group. And thankfully, Rob has managed to get that through one of the charities, Swan UK. He's met, they're very focused on Father's Day. It's the only charity we've ever come across that do that, because it's just as important for dads.
Absolutely.
So he's got his little dad group, haven't you, that you see occasionally.
That was important, especially at that time, because that was all pre-lockdown and COVID restrictions and kind of changing the landscape of remote working and stuff, because, you know, I very rarely came to the school. It'd be on a day off to pick up, and I loved it. So I'd very rarely speak, because of my co-workers, that I can't think of any co-worker at the time I had that knew of looking after a disabled person or having a disabled child. So trying to have conversations with people who might fully they'll try and understand and be really empathetic, and they'll try and give you the support that you want, which was brilliant. But to speak to someone who kind of was going through the same thing was really important. And obviously Steph might have got a bit of that through talking to some of the other parents that were able to pick up. It's normally the mums, isn't it? But so then when I got with this charity and I could speak to other dads, it was so weird, because I was listening to people talking about things that I'd already going through, and then that I might go through, and it was it was brilliant. And I think you got to talk more about this stuff, because for too long we just bottled it all up, and it probably, you know, wasn't good for Max, because there were so many times I think we could have done more with him. You know, we should have done more. You know, we were too worried about everything, too scared about everything. Always the worst possible outcome's going to happen. It's like, why didn't I take him there? Why didn't I do that? Maybe he would have got something out of that. Instead of thinking, oh, he won't like that, he might have done. And but until you go through it and you look back, it's difficult. At that time,
I think it's very important to have the right people to talk to. I mean, I'll talk to anybody, but if they've not been through it, you often get that look of pity, and it's not their fault. It's default reaction. They're not being in that situation, and hearing it, they probably think, oh my goodness, you poor person, you. So it's natural. But I think it's not just anybody. Maybe that's why we didn't talk to anybody, because at the time we didn't have anybody around us that was going through anything like what we were. But as he's got older and we've met more people and discovered these charities and things like that, then you start to have the right audience to talk to.
Absolutely. And like you say, talking to somebody and getting pity, which is something you don't need, isn't going to be something that's going to benefit you.
No.
So when did Swan first come into your lives?
We found it online, so we went again.
Oh, wow, Google search.
Yes, Google search. They're not a big charity. Still aren't a big charity, and they're not advertised. They haven't got any leaflets in the hospital. I don't know whether they have now. I've still not spotted any. But where some charities, you'll see a notice board or something and think, oh, what's that? And go over and have a look. It was literally, I think I was Googling about a child being undiagnosed, and because his official diagnosis is something like global development delay.
Yes.
It doesn't fit to the child. I mean, I think often if he comes in and the professional's never met him before, they kind of look at him and it's like, oh, wasn't expecting that child to be wheeled through the door. I don't know. But thankfully, that isn't too much of a barrier, because once they meet him, it's different. But yeah, I was Googling because you think you're alone. You think everybody's got a diagnosis. Oh, he or she has got that condition. Oh, right, okay, because that's what you hear all the time. And then you think, well, it must be really, really rare. And then you find out it's not. And it's not rare at all. And actually, there's a charity for children in the UK that don't have a diagnosis and often will never have a diagnosis. Some of them do, and they become graduate swans.
Graduate
swans, yes.
Wow.
And they join a whole different Facebook group. But the majority of us sit where we are in the swan group after having lots of tests. Lots of children are on more than one programme trying to find out what's going on, and they never do. So they still suspect, crazily enough, they still suspect that it is a genetic syndrome. It's just so rare. They cannot find which gene it has altered, because sometimes it can be part of a gene. It's not even the full gene. It's really, really complex. So that's why they often can't find what's causing it. But yeah, it was just one day, and I would say he was probably around 4. Rob, would you? Was it around? He was around 4 years old.
What, when you first
discovered swan?
Maybe 5 or 6, maybe 5.
It was
4 or 5.
It was before the epilepsy, I think. So it may have been. It was early 5, maybe, if it was 5. But I came across it, and there was an online form, and just filled it in, and then it was like, oh, you've got a secret Facebook group you can join, and there's all these other parents, and it's like, oh, and we do this, and we go on family trips and days out and things. And again, all the children have got all different conditions, but there's lots of children like Max. And so all of a sudden you start to think, oh, okay, yeah, we fit here. We fit here.
And even the children that do get a diagnosis, a lot of the families stay linked to that, because there's still that kind of, well, we know what you're going through. Because at the base of it, every kid has still got some kind of additional need or disability, whether it's diagnosed or not. So there's still that kind of understanding of, yeah, we know what it's like to have a child with those kind of conditions. And with the charity itself, and we mentioned I met up with some of the dads, as nerve-wracking as it was to meet people and talk openly about stuff, just from one afternoon and evening, I honestly, and I wasn't the person that was saying it, it was like I came away with like 10 new friends, because everyone seemed to understand each other, and that's what I hadn't had for years. We were talking about, people are like, oh, you can't do this, I've got to cancel this, or I need more time to. It's like, yeah, everyone understood. You can't just do things at the drop of a hat, or you can't go there, you might be anxious about this. And it was really like a cathartic kind of thing, and it really helped me.
Was it a real turning point then for you, do you think?
Yeah, I think it did, in the terms of like, you're not alone with it. There's other people, and there was 2 other dads there from the Leicester area, so I became closer friends with them. We've met up a few times. We did a swan trip to the Space Centre and they were both there, though I don't think we saw them all at the same time. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's one of those things when you're with other people, and I say it when we're out and about as well. There's like this connection when you see someone else similar to your son.
You feel like you should salute
that
them or
little
something.
knowing.
It's like
we're with you.
It's a bit of a, I know what you're going through,
Yeah.
or I know why you look tired, why you've got bags on you. Because there are times when, you know what I found more recently over the last few years is that more people ask me, and I don't know about you, Steph, but how are you? Because obviously when I was going away, well, how's Steph and the boys? And I'm like, yeah, they're all right, good. And then it'd stop. Whereas now I think more people are like, how are you doing? I'm like, if you want me to get too deep, I'll be like, I'm a 2 out of 10. But most of the time, I'm okay, kind of thing. But it's nice when people ask you more. Maybe, I don't know, but but the swan thing, Steph discovered all this stuff because she's all over that stuff. She's my hero with all that stuff. But with the undiagnosed thing, like what Steph said, we've got no idea what to expect, and
you do get the professionals to say, well, it doesn't matter, does it? Because you can treat the individual conditions. It's not true. it has a huge impact.
It's tough. Someone recently, I think, said, would getting a diagnosis help? And I think, yes, it wouldn't, like what you said, with day to day, it doesn't affect that too much, but it would help in terms of what to expect, what could he be entitled to, what support could we get, could it open some different doors. The life limiting thing, unfortunately, is something that I'll probably think about every single day. Would you want to know? I don't know, but
you suspect anyway.
It's just things that play on your mind every day. And it's like sometimes, even though knowing an answer that you might not want to have, but you know.
It's almost preparing for the future.
And stuff. I think that's the thing about the undiagnosed. It's just, I still get people sometimes look a little bit surprised when I say, oh, he's nearly 10 and he's still, we don't actually know what he's got. He's got epilepsy, he's visually impaired, he's got this. But his actual thing, we don't know.
I think people do just assume though, don't they, that young people are diagnosed with whatever syndrome it is, and people don't know that there is this massive group of young people going into adulthood who still are undiagnosed, and like so many thousands of children each year are born with a condition that hasn't yet maybe been identified. And it's really important to raise awareness, because there could well be many families out there who felt just how you felt, and actually getting them in touch with Swan early days could be a real game changer for them. And I'm sure it probably would have made things quite different for you if you'd have had that early on.
I think if we'd found them when he was younger, I think we would have had a different journey, because we would have felt part of a community more, which is what you feel now. And Rob's so right about when you go somewhere and you know, there's children with all different conditions, but you feel you're a community. And that the holiday he talked about, where we came back, and after being on this amazing inclusive holiday where Max, everything was adapted so he could join in, and then bam, back to reality, service station, being stared at. It was actually quite a shock for me, because I've been in my little bubble for a week, and it's like this community bubble where nobody's judged. It doesn't matter what your child is doing at the dinner table, or he's a bit of a dirty eater, isn't he, Max? He's a bit of an animal.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Throwing food and whatnot, but nobody cares. You know, it's you just live in life, and then all of a sudden you come away from that, and it's like, oh yeah, this is actually the world we live in, though, where two people that are, you know, elderly towards the end of their lives, and yet they still can't manage, after living on this earth for that many years, to avert their eyes and not stare at this little boy and make his family feel really uncomfortable. And they still, you know, they just can't. And not everybody's like that, of course, but you will find there's a minority of people, and they're the ones that affect you. They're the ones that can. You remember them, yes.
So I remember that particular week, it was quite an emotional week, because it was a real connection with everyone there. And it wasn't just the people we went with, there was other people there who come up to you and like, oh, what condition have you got? And they tell you about it, and like, yeah, but you know, I still do this, I come here, it's amazing. They speak to Max like, you know, so many people speak over your kids, or they don't really, but they talk to him, like engage with him, like he understands what they're saying, kind of thing. Like, let's see if he understands first before we assume he can't understand anything. And like, if we had been aware of things like Swan earlier on, like Steph said, I think it would make a difference, because just, even though I might not have necessarily reached out to someone, but on a Facebook group or something, you can quite easily just start reading things and put a comment on, and then someone could reply to you, and we didn't do anything. Because we didn't do anything, did we? And it was just us three.
Because we didn't know it existed, and none of the professionals. There are a few now. I've had it mentioned once from one of the professionals we've met, and said, "Oh, have you heard of Swan?" And I said, "Yes, I have. We're part of it." I said, "But please keep mentioning that to people," because they were the first person, and by then we'd been with Swan a few years. But it's hopefully it's getting out there more. But that's what you need. You need the health visitors. You need the paediatricians, the first point of call when these parents are coming in with these children, that somebody says, oh, you haven't got a diagnosis yet, have you heard of SWAN? And even if you then end up having a diagnosis, there's still a place for you within SWAN. But yeah, it's just not common knowledge, I don't think. And I'm sure there is lots of parents out there that do feel like, oh, is my child the only child without a diagnosis? I mean, I remember saying to the paediatrician on Max's last appointment, I said, so when are we going to change his diagnosis? Because how long can he have a delay for? I said, he's double digits this year. I said, how long can we just have a delay, global development delay? I said, what does it become? I said, because he can't, past 16, when he starts to go into the adult world, he can't be known as having global development delay. And he said, oh, well, then it will just become a learning disability. That's what his diagnosis will be. But it's crazy that they don't have anything they can put down for that. That this child is profoundly disabled, and they can't just put that. It's almost like it's a dirty word. They have to put global development delay. It doesn't change the fact, Max is profoundly disabled and always will be, and we know that. It wouldn't, if somebody told us, we'd gasp in horror, like, oh, you're kidding, really? Mm-hmm. But it almost is like it's a dirty word that they can't say part of his diagnosis is this child is profoundly disabled. It's they skirt around it and it's a very strange place to be, because as a parent, like I say, you wouldn't, know what your child's like. I'm not walking around with blinkers on. I know my child's challenges. And why can't his diagnosis
represent who he is?
Yes, exactly. Thank
Absolutely.
you. Yes. But it doesn't, so it's quite still kind of strange world to be in. Whereas if he had a diagnosis, then that would be stated there. It would be listed, and it would say, right, this child has that. Oh, so that child must be profoundly disabled because they have that condition, and everybody would know that. But it's almost like, well, no, we can't put that. We can't, because that those terms.
There's
very strange.
There's a real need to educate people, isn't there? In that there are so many young people out there and adults with profound and multiple learning difficulties or disabilities, and that actually that's not something that's a negative, and that there is a place for them, and there's so many things that can be done and a wonderful life that can be had, and that label, it's that fear of the label, isn't it? And it's that label that you guys don't have for a syndrome or a disability, but then there's this fear of putting another label on. But actually sometimes labels can be good, because you can belong to a group, or you can accurately describe,
and it will open doors. Yes. There's always pros and cons to every situation, but thankfully we've not found too many cons, because I don't put about, if I'm filling in forms or I'm talking to somebody about him, I don't mention the global development delay. I talk about the individual disabilities that he has. I list them. And I've done that before I even thought about it, really. It was just because global development never fit for him. It never fitted. So I just would say, what condition has he got? And instead of just saying, oh, well, he's not, I just used to say, right, well, he's this. And that's always the way that I'd handled it. So hopefully he hasn't missed out on anything that he was entitled to. I hope so, because that's my fear, is that he would not receive something he was entitled to, some support or help and that kind of thing. And I hopefully he hasn't. But yeah, and the majority of people that, as I say, you've just got to arrange a face-to-face appointment, and you can see it in their face. But thankfully, from doing that, they can see the child and see, okay, so we need to work at it from here, really, not from what the paperwork says. And it's,
absolutely, it's child-centred. Meeting Max is the most important thing, because until you meet an individual, an EHCP or a diagnosis is just a piece of paper until you meet that person, that individual. Because no two people with the same condition are the same are they? So, we learn that, and working in a special school, you see that day in, day out. So it just goes some way to helping to understand a young person's needs, but it's never going to be solely what they need, because everybody's an individual with different likes and dislikes and sensory needs. So those are the challenges that you guys have experienced across the years, but I'm sure there must have been many, many moments of joy. What is the best thing about being Max's parents?
just how amazing he is. It's just because there wasn't the diagnosis, we didn't know what he'd achieve or what he wouldn't be able to. And then when he achieves something, oh my goodness, you want to crack the champagne out. It's like amazing, you know, when he finally, it's such a small thing for so many parents, but when he finally sat up, it was like, oh, Rob is sitting. And then he just got stronger and stronger. And then when he learned to bum shuffle, it was, oh my goodness, he's mobile. It was, and you know, now you could see him and he's like, well, I want that toy. So I'm going to go and get that toy. I'm going to shuffle over and I'm going to get that toy. And he started to make choices for himself. And while, okay, he's, you know, it may still be limited, but it opened up a whole new world for Max. And it's just how he deals with it. I think that's the best thing, is how he deals with things.
It's just a really weird feeling.
But for me, yeah, that's it. It's just, this is what my favourite thing about Max doing life with a smile on his face. There's not very often that amazing smile isn't on his. He's got such a beautiful smile.
He has. It lights up a room.
And his laugh, oh my goodness, he's got such a dirty laugh. But for me, it's just, it's just how strong he is. It's just such a strong, like I say little boy, and he's not that little anymore.
It's hard to explain the best thing about being his parent and the stuff he does. I think I always remember telling someone once how I felt I could never be happy because of everything he was going through. Whereas now, he is happy pretty much every day. He wakes up, you walk in, and he's got a massive smile on his face, and you kind of think, why is he so happy? Because of all of the things he's going through and has been through. Why does he wake up with a massive smile on his face every day? And he's just, when he's like that, you think he's just so amazing. So to be his parent, it kind of gives you that inspiration of there's more to it than just the day-to-day. There's something there that he can be happy with all of this stuff going on, and it gives you a real insight into what it really is,
what's important.
He's and like Steph says, all the little milestones when he sat up for the first time, or he starts bum shuffling, and they're all amazing things. But it's even like when he spots something across the room and he's visually impaired and he can still see certain things, and he listens to you when you call his name. I mean, there's times when he absolutely does my head in massively. But he's like one of the biggest causes of stress at times. But on the flip side, when you see how happy he gets at certain things, it just makes me so happy to be his dad. And then I think we probably should give ourselves a bit more credit of that we're part of that. We're keeping him like that. It's difficult to explain, to be honest, because I think the day-to-day routine is kind of, we do a lot of the same stuff, but when he's happy in those moments, it's amazing. You know, it's a difficult one to answer it in a weird way, because there's no.
But you do need to give yourselves a lot of credit, because he is such a happy young man.
Yeah.
Because of the environment that he has been raised in and everything that you do for him. And he's very happy at school as well. And it's getting both those worlds right, isn't it? Yeah. It's that home life and that school life. He is very happy at school. He's happy at home. He is such a happy young man.
Oh, we always say his favourite place is here. Oh, yeah. He loves school. He'd
school.
Live here if he could. He prefers you guys to us.
Oh, I don't know.
For sure. But he is. He's just. It is. Yeah. I mean, things would be very different if the school didn't fit him. If it wasn't the right fit for him. No, he wouldn't be the same boy that he is.
Would you say that Birchwood has really changed your lives then?
It's definitely mine. because it meant that I could actually meet other people who were in the same boat. I mean, coming from, I wasn't involved with that. I worked in finance, all very boring, until I had Max. The idea was I was going to have this child and I was going to go back to full-time work, and he was just going to slot in some nursery somewhere. And then obviously that didn't happen. And so I'd although it's saying that, I mean, there is autism in my family. My brother's autistic, so I had some experience. But I was 13 when he came along. I never went with my mum to do all the groups and everything. So it was, although I was empathetic to the world of special needs, I wasn't involved with it. So I didn't know anybody. And obviously Max is a whole different kettle of fish. So it was a bit of a shocker, and I just didn't know anybody. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, hello. Your child's in a wheelchair as well. What's your name? And it was very much like that. I remember going over to one of the mums and I'd spotted her daughter in a wheelchair, and I thought, I'm going to go and talk to that mum. And I said, oh, hi, you're so-and-so's mum, aren't you? And she said, yeah. And I said, oh, I'm Max's mum. And she was like, hello. And we're still friends now. So although she says it happened differently, it did not. It was me that went over to her. But yeah, it was. I thought, well, and I've made friends because of this school, and it's opened my eyes to different needs and challenges in the children. And it's not just my child. I used to come to the Christmas productions. I'd be crying at somebody else's child because what they'd achieved. I was like, this is so amazing. And it's that community again. And all of a sudden it's not just about your child. Yeah, you're looking at another child that's achieved something, and you know how that would feel. So that you get emotional for that parent, because you know how amazing that feeling for that parent is right at that point. So I think that's why the schools, I mean, obviously special needs schools are so important for the children. They need to fit, they need to belong, they need to thrive, they need to achieve whatever they personally can achieve. And I think if schools like this didn't exist, then they wouldn't. But it's so much more than that. It's about the family, it's about the community, it's about the wider community as well. I mean, because of these parents that I've met, when the playground had, the local part of the playground had some funding, and they just weren't going to put anything in to do with disability, no swings, no roundabout, it was nothing, they hadn't been catered for at all. And a few of us got together and we sent some emails and we messaged them on Facebook, and we said, well, hang on a minute, what about the children like us? And then all of a sudden a local charity came along that obviously heard about the plight, and they donated money, and now there is a wheelchair swing, and there's special swings for children that obviously just need to have a little bit more support. So they tried to cater for different abilities, I suppose. And while that might seem such a small thing, it means that now Max can go to the park and actually go on something. He's not just sitting there watching his younger brother play. And it's that, you know, I think, would I have said something if we hadn't had this community that said, hang on a minute, you know, this isn't I don't know, I can't answer that question. I don't know whether I would have, because I'd have been a lone voice. And I think it's things like that you just, you know, you talk to other mums, or me, it's mums really, and say, well, that's not right. Well, oh yeah, I'll message them. Are you going to message them? Oh yeah, I'll email them. And then it's this thing that spirals then. And so it's so important. These schools are so important, and you all do an amazing job. We're forever grateful, because you have made Max part of the child that he is as well. It's not just us. It takes a village. So, I'm going to get emotional. But yes.
Why you two get emotional? It's like when I look at Max and I think, and I tell people about him, it's like, you know, he can't walk, he can't talk, he can't see very well. He doesn't have, as far as I'm aware, much of an understanding of the world and what's happening around him, so to speak. But ever since we first visited this school and we had a look around, and we saw the way that the staff that were taking us around interacted with any kids that were, you know, moving around the corridors with teachers and stuff, and there's a real good vibe about the place. It's that kind of like community and inclusion, and that our son, who I've just described, who can't do a lot of those things, he comes in and he's so happy. And like Steph said, that's a big part of you guys who make that possible. So I don't think there's enough words to say thanks for that. It's a huge part of his. I think it is his favourite place in the world, coming to school, and so that speaks testament to all of you guys here. And yeah, I mean it's slightly different for me in terms of friends and stuff, but you know, I've made some acquaintances here and I have a good chat with people, and I feel safe. I can leave my son here knowing he's safe, he's happy, and that he'll have a good day, and that I can not have to worry about him for the day. I can have a break.
And he gets to do some of his favourite things.
And there's not many places and people you can leave kids like that with and feel like that. So this school's made a huge impact on his life and on our life.
You make us more fearful for the future though, because then we think, right, well, when he finishes here, what are we going to do?
But there is a real concern, isn't it? Because it's that provision after school.
Yes.
What's going to be comparable
to this? And there isn't at the moment. That's the problem. Locally, there isn't. And I think that's very scary, because, you know, so much effort is put into him and the other children to make sure that, yes, they do reach their potential. 5 days a week, that is pumped in to their day to make sure that they are engaged at the level they need to be, and that they are, you know, they're enjoying school life and they're getting something out of it, and then all of a sudden it just stops, and that's scary.
It's worrying because we see it often in holidays and sometimes even at weekends. You're still trying to live a, say, normal life in terms of all the day-to-day things you got to do to keep a, say, roof over the head, or keep like a house tidy, or you've got this job to do, this job to do, this job. So you can't spend all day with him, engaging with him the same kind of way. So then you consider that in like a summer holiday period, for example, he can get extremely bored, and it's tough for him and it's tough for us as well. So you've got to try and find a balance. So that is a fear in terms of when that day comes when he can't come to somewhere like this anymore. How are we going to negotiate that and keep him happy? Because it will be tough. I don't like to think about that too
so
much.
We don't.
It frightens me
that's the answer. We just don't.
And it feels a long way off at the moment. I know time flies, but
it's dealing with one challenge at a time, isn't it? Sometimes you
have
to think too far ahead.
And that sometimes is part of the problem when you have got a kid like Max. You can think way too far ahead and think of way too much stuff.
And keep yourself awake at night.
Yeah. Like when I mention about thinking about like the life limiting thing, you think about it every day. Do you really need to think about that every day? No, but it creeps in. So if you think too far ahead of everything, it can get too overwhelming. Unfortunately, I can't speak for Steph, but I know I don't always manage that very well. But
I'm quite good at I think dealing with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Just
I can put things to the back of my mind if I need to. If it's not,
but
if it's not there in front of my face and I have to deal with it now, then no, I can. So thankfully, and I've learned if I'm thinking about something at night, I'll get up and go and have a drink or something and break that cycle, so that I'm not just laying there, and then you know, try and clear your head a little bit, because it doesn't do you any good.
But I guess it's that bringing back to the kind of Birchwood thing, because Birchwood is so good and such a big part of his life. It just leaves you with that worry for after.
Yeah.
So, not saying that you should not be as good.
or you know, maybe create another building or something for the young adults as they leave. Yes, some kind of
Make the last couple of years a bit worse. So prepare them gently for the outside world.
Oh my goodness. Well, this is the thing. It's getting that awareness out there now and making people aware that this is a facility that is needed, and that there are a lot of young people who are going to need more than is being offered to them post leaving education, and that there needs to be something else because there's a lot of young people out there in the same boat who need to have the right provision when they leave school. So, to finish today, could we think about 3 words that you would use to describe Max?
Oh, 3 words I would use to describe Max. Happy, resilient, and a warrior.
How about you, Rob?
Well, I was thinking of resilient. But I'll
you
try and
stole it.
Yeah, because he is.
You can still have it.
I'd say inspirational, and that's based on everything he's gone through, and you take that into context of your own life. Amazing, which is a similar word, but and I would go. I won't use happy. I'll say joyful, because he is. When he is on his game, he is so happy, and his laugh and his smile, it's infectious. And they're the best times of him. When he's on it, it's amazing. Yeah. So there you go.
Thank you both so much for coming to chat to me today.
Thank you.
If you would like more information on Swan UK, please visit their website, undiagnosed.org.uk.